Acquisition terms are final, my stepbrother announced, sliding the contract across the boardroom table with a satisfied smile. Congratulations, Rebecca. You built something worth stealing. He didn't realize I had leveraged his ambition against him, and that his signature on those documents had just transferred controlling interest of his family's century-old publishing empire directly to me. I am Rebecca Chen, though professionally I've always used my mother's surname Harlow. At 34, I'm the founder and CEO of Artemis Digital, a boutique digital media company specializing in revitalizing traditional print publications for the modern era. 5 years ago, we were a struggling startup. Today, we're the acquisition target of Lancaster Publishing, the company that should have been partly mine by birthright. My history with Lancaster Publishing began when I was 12, the year my mother married Richard Lancaster, CEO and majority shareholder of the publishing dynasty founded by his grandfather. A widower with a 16-year-old son, Richard welcomed me into their sprawling Boston home with genuine warmth. His son, Alexander, made his feelings clear on my first night under their roof. "Don't get comfortable," he whispered as he passed me in the hallway. "You're not a real Lancaster. You'll never have a place here." Despite Alex's hostility, I found unexpected joy in my new life. Richard became the father I'd never had, encouraging my interest in literature and journalism, bringing me to the office on weekends to explore the vast archives of Lancaster's century of publications. While Alex was groomed to take over the company, attending board meetings, shadowing executives, I absorbed everything from the ground up, learning from editors, designers, and the digital team that was just beginning to grapple with the internet's disruption of traditional publishing. When Richard died unexpectedly during my second year of college, everything changed. Alex, newly graduated from Harvard Business School, took control of Lancaster Publishing with his inheritance of 60% of company shares. My mother received 10%, with the remaining 30% distributed among long-term executives and a family trust. At the memorial service, Alex made his first executive decision. "We're selling the brownstone," he informed my mother and me. "The company is providing you a settlement. I expect you'll want your own place." The settlement was generous financially but devastating emotionally. Within a month, we were removed from the family home and effectively erased from the Lancaster narrative. My mother, heartbroken, retreated to her hometown in California. I stayed in Boston, determined to finish my degree in digital media and communications. 2 weeks after graduation, I received a certified letter. Lancaster Publishing was formally declining my application for their management training program. No explanation was given, but none was needed. Alex had made good on his promise. I would have no place in what should have been my family's company. Instead, I joined a struggling digital media startup, working 18-hour days to help transform traditional content for online audiences. When that company was acquired 2 years later, I used my small windfall to found Artemis Digital, focusing on a niche Alex and others in traditional publishing overlooked, revitalizing legacy publications with dedicated but aging readerships. Our model was different from the slash-and-burn approach of most digital transformations. We preserved editorial quality while creating sustainable digital revenue streams, respecting the core identity of each publication while making it viable for the future. We started small: literary journals, regional magazines, specialized industry publications, but our reputation grew as each project succeeded where others had failed. Throughout those years, I kept tabs on Lancaster Publishing through industry connections and my mother's small ownership stake, which provided annual reports. Under Alex's leadership, The company aggressively expanded its portfolio, but struggled to adapt to digital disruption. Prestigious titles were gutted to cut costs, digital strategies shifted with every new consultant, and the company's reputation for editorial excellence deteriorated. Our paths crossed occasionally at industry events. Alex always greeted me with the same condescending smile. "Still playing with websites, Rebecca? How cute." He never bothered to learn what Artemis actually did, viewing digital media as beneath the dignity of true publishing, something to be delegated to subordinates while real executives made decisions about print and distribution. 6 months after our acquisition, during a digitization project of the magazine's archives, our team discovered something extraordinary: a sealed envelope in the magazine's original incorporation documents, labeled for transfer of ownership only. Inside was an addendum to the original purchase agreement when Lancaster Publishing had acquired the Inkwell Review in 1967. The document stipulated that if Lancaster ever sold the magazine, a dormant ownership stake in Lancaster Publishing, 3% held in trust by the magazine's original family owners, would be included in the transaction. Alex had sold the Inkwell Review to a private investor for a nominal sum, who then sold it to another party, and eventually to Artemis. But none of the subsequent transactions had acknowledged or transferred the 3% ownership stake. According to our attorneys, the stake had legally transferred with each sale, meaning Artemis now owned 3% of Lancaster Publishing. This discovery coincided with a financial crisis at Lancaster. Years of declining print revenue and failed digital initiatives had left the company overextended, with several banks calling in loans. Industry rumors suggested they were seeking emergency investment or considering selling premier assets. I saw an opportunity not just for business advantage, but for a reckoning. Through careful, quiet maneuvering over the next year, Artemis Digital achieved 3 key objectives. First, we acquired 2 more publications previously sold off by Lancaster, each with similar dormant ownership stakes, bringing our total ownership in Lancaster Publishing to 7%. Second, we formed a strategic partnership with my mother, creating a voting trust that combined her 10% ownership with Artemis's 7%. Third, and most importantly, we positioned Artemis Digital as a potential acquisition target for Lancaster Publishing, leaking data about our remarkable success in digital transformation and revenue growth to industry publications. The bait was set, and Alex, predictably, took it. Always looking for quick fixes rather than structural change, he saw acquiring a successful digital media company as a way to appease his board and creditors without having to transform Lancaster's fundamental operations. When the acquisition offer came, I feigned reluctance, insisting on a premium valuation and specific terms that would give me oversight of digital strategy. Alex, believing he could sideline me after the acquisition was complete, agreed to all conditions without thorough due diligence. Which brings us to today, the final signing of acquisition documents in Lancaster Publishing's mahogany panel boardroom. Alex sitting at the head of the table where his father once sat, sliding papers toward me with that same dismissive smile he'd worn since we were teenagers. "Acquisition terms are final," he announced. "Congratulations, Rebecca. You built something worth stealing." I signed the documents without comment, then watched as he did the same. "Now," he continued, "as discussed, you'll lead our new digital division, reporting directly to our Chief Operating Officer. We've prepared an announcement about Lancaster Publishing's expansion into digital media through this strategic acquisition." "That won't be necessary," I replied, nodding to my attorney, who distributed folders to everyone present. "I've prepared my own announcement." Alex frowned, opening the folder. What is this? The complete record of ownership transfers of the Inkwell Review and 2 other publications, along with the original trust documents establishing their connected ownership stakes in Lancaster Publishing. Combined with my mother's shares, we now control 17% of Lancaster Publishing. His face paled. This is absurd. Our legal team would have. Your legal team did review these publications before you sold them, I interrupted. But they failed to recognize the significance of provisions hidden in original acquisition agreements from the 1960s. The evidence is irrefutable and has been verified by 3 independent law firms. The Lancaster executives exchanged alarmed glances as my attorney continued. Furthermore, the terms of the acquisition you just signed include a share exchange that effectively converts Artemis Digital's private shares into Lancaster Publishing voting shares, with a 3-year lockup period preventing executive leadership from selling their positions. You can't possibly. With the additional shares created through the acquisition terms you just approved, our voting position increases to 23%, I continued calmly. Combined with the 12% held by board members who have already pledged their support for new leadership, we now control 35% of voting shares. According to Lancaster's bylaws, that's sufficient to call for a vote of no confidence in current management. The color had completely drained from Alex's face. This is a hostile takeover. No, Alex. This is a correction. You've systematically destroyed what your grandfather and father built. Lancaster's market value has declined 60% under your leadership. 4 of your flagship publications are on the verge of bankruptcy. The company has lost its editorial direction and failed to establish any coherent digital strategy. I closed my folder and looked directly at him. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you prepare a transition plan. You planned this from the beginning, he said, his voice hollow with shock. All those years. Not from the beginning, I corrected him. I didn't plan anything until you made it clear there would never be a place for me in this company, despite what your father wanted. You taught me an important lesson, Alex. Blood may be thicker than water, but ink, contracts, written words, legal documents, ink is thicker than blood. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The board voted overwhelmingly to remove Alex from his position as CEO, installing me as interim chief executive while a search committee identified permanent leadership. I had no intention of running Lancaster Publishing long-term. My passion remained with Artemis Digital and our model of thoughtful transformation. But I needed to stabilize the company and establish new strategic direction. Alex disappeared to his summer home in the Hamptons, refusing all communication. Most of his executive team resigned or were dismissed as the full extent of mismanagement became clear. The company's financial situation was even worse than industry rumors had suggested, with several signature publications literally weeks away from collapse. I assembled a transition team combining Lancaster veterans who had been sidelined under Alex's leadership with digital strategists from Artemis. Together, we developed a 3-year recovery plan focused on preserving editorial quality while creating sustainable digital revenue models. Exactly the approach that had succeeded at Artemis, but at much larger scale. 6 months into the transformation, Lancaster Publishing held its annual holiday party at the Boston Public Library, a tradition my stepfather had established decades earlier. As I stood addressing the gathered employees, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me there. Publishing has never been about platforms, I told them. Whether words appear on paper or screens, what matters is their quality, their integrity, and their impact. Lancaster's century of excellence was built on understanding that content creates the relationship with readers. Everything else is just delivery. We lost sight of that fundamental truth for a while, but we're finding our way back. After the speech, as I circulated among staff, a senior editor who had worked with my stepfather approached. "Richard would be proud," she said, touching my arm. "He always told me you understood publishing in your bones. Said you reminded him of his father, the original Lancaster who built all this." "Thank you," I replied, unexpectedly moved. "I wish he could see what we're building now." "Oh, he sees," she smiled. "And so does someone else." She nodded toward the entrance, where Alex stood awkwardly, looking out of place in the company he had led for nearly a decade. I crossed the room to meet him, unsure what to expect. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. "I almost didn't." He looked around the room, at the animated conversations between print editors and digital strategists, at the displays showcasing both heritage publications and new digital initiatives. "You've changed things." "We had to. The company was dying." He nodded slowly. I received the quarterly reports. The digital subscription numbers are impressive. Coming from Alex, this qualified as effusive praise. We stood in awkward silence for a moment. "I never gave you a chance," he finally said. "From the beginning I saw you as a threat. The way Dad looked at you, he never looked at me that way. He was proud of you too, Alex. He just showed it differently." "Maybe." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about what you said, about ink being thicker than blood. You were right about the contracts but wrong about what matters most. Dad built this company for family. Whatever our differences, that's what we are." He extended his hand, offering a small leather-bound book. "This was his personal journal from the year he married your mother. I thought you should have it." I accepted the journal, unexpectedly touched by the gesture. "Thank you." "I'm starting something new," he continued. "A publishing consultancy. Smaller scale, focused on areas I actually understand. I'd like your advice sometime, if you're willing." It wasn't an apology exactly, but from Alex, it represented significant evolution. "I'd be happy to talk," I replied. "Families should help each other." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Alex, there will always be a place for you at Lancaster. When you're ready." He nodded once, then disappeared into the December evening. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible after so many years of animosity, but the company Richard Lancaster had built deserved to have both his children involved in its future, each contributing their distinct strengths. The journal Alex had given me felt significant in my hands, a piece of family history passing from one generation to the next. Later that night, alone in my office overlooking Boston Harbor, I opened Richard's journal. Inside the cover, he had written a single line that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Family is not defined by blood alone, but by those who preserve our stories." In publishing as in families, what endures is not who owns the legacy, but who honors it, who ensures that the stories and values continue to matter in a changing world. By those measures, Lancaster Publishing was in good hands, regardless of whose name appeared on the masthead. Sometimes the most meaningful victories aren't about winning control, but about restoring purpose. Ink may secure ownership, but only vision preserves legacy.